Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for the very interesting presentations. We've all learned a bit, including myself. So, thank you. We've heard a number of interesting things this evening, and perhaps I'll start with the European initiatives, if you don't mind. There's a lot of energy that's being put into this by the European Commission. You talked about setting up a European blockchain infrastructure, the different incentive programs with Horizon 2020. How will you measure success? You can use
Very good question. So there's lots of energy being put there, but just to size also this kind of energy, it's a small team. Huh? We're not 200 people working on this. So it's a lot of energy indeed. How will we measure success? It's a very good question. I think we, as we were showing, we need, I would say, three pillars. The educational one, to be successful, we need people that understand what we are talking about. This is a great concern. Today I was talking with some Bitcoin miners and wallet providers, and they are really, really, really scared that we don't understand what we are doing before regulating. So I think this is the first key for success. Let people understand what we are talking about, the potential, the challenges, what's there on the plate, and how it is evolving. The second thing that I see is to stimulate research and innovation where needed. For instance, I think that smart contracts, I'm really glad that we hear your presentation, but I think that smart contracts is something that is really not fixed in stone for the moment. So how these developments will go further, is there a need for a sort of a higher level regulation or legal framework that offers for certainty? Offer for legal certainty when you enforce these smart contracts, which kind of smart contract, what exactly a smart contract. And then I think a third part would be walking the talk. So be operational and try to pilot something that makes sense, that make life of citizens easier. For instance, when you can digitally onboard and you can transfer your credentials in an easy way, or for enterprises when you have to pay VAT across borders, that it's straightforward. So for me, that's very ambitious, but I mean, we have listened that it's before 2020 that you have to get ready. We'll try to be there.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned about forcing is not the right word, helping understanding between the different parties and stakeholders. Perhaps a question for the regulator. René, how do you see understanding between the different sides? Do you see it growing? Is there a maturing relationship between, let's say, the blockchain companies in their various forms? You have the well-known crypto companies, but you also have the other ones. Is there a growing understanding of the different views?
Also a good but tough question. I agree with my colleague here on my right-hand side that I would add dialogue is one of the pillars to come to a successful relationship. If I have in mind incumbent companies who are implementing new technologies to improve current business lines, I would say the relationship with the regulator is mature because it's a long-standing relationship. They have all the legal requirements we are asking them to be compliant with. So there are no doubts about what the functionality of their applications are. So that is a mature, grown-up relationship. Often the incumbents are following several ways to implement new technologies, or they have an organic development in-house. What we see is that they often isolate that business from current business, not to jeopardize current business that proves to be efficient. or they spar up via a joint venture with startups, and they work under the licenses and the registers of the incumbents. When it comes to startups who have no experience, who have not a clue about the context of the operations of a financial institutions, and therefore I liked the presentation of the Know Your Customer we saw today, because those guys are very, very much aware of how it works in a bank, and that helps to understand what the role of the regulator is. We are not inventing ourselves. We cannot make business nicer for you. We have the task to protect the financial consumer in the end, and we are well, controlling if applications can be considered as the offering of a financial service or a product, and then the current legislation applies. And there the dialogue is much more complicated, because often they come to see us, if they come to see us on their own initiative, at a very late stage before they want to implement their idea, their DIP. And they do not see the use of seeing us, and we are not handicapping their development, but we are just doing what we are asked to do. And often they have no clue about financial laws. They have no clue that there are some ethical standards. If financial regulation doesn't apply, normal contract law applies. So there are a whole set of laws that has to be respected, despite the development thing is not enough. For us, of course, it is a new kind of people we have to talk to. Often they do not have a foundation, they have no legal form, they are even not known. So it is not so easy to make clear. And often what can handicap the dialogue as well is that they come to see us at one stage, and the next day the website or the protocol or the prototype has changed fully. You know, we are used to have a file, and the file is complete, and yeah, and the file doesn't change. So it is shocking on both sides, and there we are learning on both sides. And we are happy today we saw a new startup, and they came to see us in a very early stage, a little bit too early to have an idea about the exact direction where they're going to. But there was a creation of an awareness of attention points, and that is useful. To this audience, you have to be aware that we are exploiting a SPOC, a single point of contact, together with the other regulator, the National Bank. There is a split oversight hierarchy in Belgium. We are responsible for everything which is financial markets, behavior, protection of the financial consumer, whereas the central bank is in charge of the payment system. So whether it is a crypto asset deployable as a cryptocurrency, often you touch the sphere of payments, and then very highly likely you need a license for a payment institution. So it depends a little bit where the application is going to. There it's early days, so talking about a mature relationship, it's too early.
Okay, thank you. As the annex in your presentation, you briefly referred also to the numbers for the Dubai region. I understand you also have projects running in that area. Do you see differences in terms of how blockchain is being approached compared to, say, Europe or?
Actually, there are many differences. Many differences on a state level, and many differences actually on a regulator level. So we've spoken to 5 regulators up to now in various countries. I would say that the ones that are most proactive are the ones in that region, because typically the regulators that we speak in Europe, they will say that, great, I love what you're doing, it's going to be very helpful for me, but I cannot give you any input on what you're doing, so build it, and I will come and then I will audit what you've done. Probably I have not spoken to you, so I'm not sure how things are done here in Belgium. But in the UAE, what happened is that they said, we love this, and then I would like to give you some input in terms of what I would like to see. So you're saying that I want to audit, I can audit a bank from the comfort of my own office. Let me tell you what I would like to audit when I audit a bank. So it's a much more collaborative relationship. The other thing is that it's, the starting point is very different, because here in Europe we have very good regulators, very good legal system to actually start from. In the UAE, they're battling a very big problem of money laundering. And so the starting point for them is very, very different. And for them, to move away from that reputation it's of paramount importance. So this is why they've embraced blockchain technology to a certain extent, in state level, but also financial services and financial regulators.
Okay, thank you. Corentin, you referred to the use case where obviously your tool allows the business people to get more involved and to use blockchain, well, without knowing they're using blockchain, but to actually get them into the game. That was a particular use case. How did that have an impact on the rest of the company? Was it did it create a buzz for that with the other departments, or how did that influence the culture?
Yeah, actually, again, it was not for the people who were using it. It was not blockchain. So it was a new system to sign, and they really liked it because it was quicker. They got more history. They got everything on the mobile and stuff. So the way we get this approach was not on the technology. It was on the usage again. So people liked it, and then it grows, and it will probably, and we hope it will grow until the customer now. So we hope we're gonna go further. But to come back to the regulation, and it will probably be the same with this customer. I was this morning with NG, which is our main partner and financial partner as well. And we were at so GEM. We say GEM's the trading part of NG. And there were like a community of 20 guys who wanted to move on blockchain, and they were like very exciting about the things. They got like tons of use cases, but always all the things that came on the table was, yeah, but we are regulated, so we cannot do that. We cannot move on that. We cannot do that. So I think today, and when I talk about these figures in 2025, 175 billions, I think it's going to happen only if we get some helps from you. And I really this is cool, we are here, and I hope we're gonna be able to talk more, because most of the use case on blockchain are linked to regulation. Most of them, I think I don't have figures, but when we talk to our customers, most of them touch to some part of the regulation, financial regulation, or when you talk about KYC, we have the GDPR, or so any cases are linked to regulation. So until we don't have, I don't know if it exists yet, but I think we don't have yet the word blockchain on the law. So until we don't have it, I'm not sure it's going to move further. But it seems that you are working on it, and I'm happy to listen to that.
In the European initiative, then we all have the European Regulatory Task Force also being closely involved in that exercise, Chiara? Or so when we have the European initiative, do we also have then like a European Regulatory Task Force to be aligned? Because there are also different levels of maturity when you look at the European landscape. How do you tackle those?
So sure. That's also what we are, of course, so European supervisory authorities are more on that side, and I'm coming from DG Connect, so I'm not on the FISMA side, yeah. So the financial services colleagues. But we had a task force, actually, cross Directorate Generals inside the Commission, exactly working on fintech issues and on blockchain issues from the two perspectives. The perspectives of the regulatory side, the financial services side, and the perspective of technology. And I'm not sure blockchain doesn't appear in any regulation. I should check.
To be honest, I don't know.
I should check, but it will appear. But for the good, like not regulating whatever moves, you know, because sometimes it's also what we hear, don't regulate this, that, and that. But of course, trying to help this ecosystem to thrive, so to have regulations that are principle-based, that are adapted to technological developments, which is not an easy task because you don't have the crystal ball, and also when you show figures, it may happen or may not happen. So we are really striving to get to this level when we will have this principle-based regulation that will be open and, of course, bring in technology neutrality. And just to conclude also on your question on how to involve national regulators, yes, it's on the agenda. What we are proposing in the FinTech Action Plan, it's two sides of the answer. So the first part, it's regulatory sandboxes, and I think it goes very much in the direction you were mentioning with the Emirates, that they do look at what's happening and then they tell you what they would like to have, and then you also try to adapt and to provide a solution. There are national examples of regulatory sandboxes. The most famous is the UK FCAs, but we have others. We have, I think, mapped 12. And of course, we have working groups on innovation and sort of sandboxes within national financial regulators. But of course, I'm not talking on behalf of my Belgian colleague.
No, because unfortunately, I have to disappoint a little bit because I cannot make it nicer, but I agree with the fact that there needs to be a more common taxonomy, so definitions of where we're talking about. But when it comes to the factors of production from an economic point of view, the ESAs where my colleague is talking about, so ESMA, EBA and EIOPA, we have a stance of technology neutrality. So we are not advocate of being good or pro or contra technology, the same stance as we are taking for labor or other kind of production factors. So, and the same thing with the sandboxes, because we have made a mapping on ESMA level, and the difference is that a lot of countries have this similar kind of initiatives, but whether they are called hubs or facilitators or sandboxes, it blows down to the promotion effort the national competent authority is putting behind.
Thank you. And then one more question for Frank here. Thank you for showing us the demo with Bob and Alice. It was nice to see it operating live. You mentioned briefly that, well, it will change how people will be working, and it also it helps them to collaborate more. How is that cultural change, and then doesn't it raise questions with some players of, well, how can we still distinguish ourselves in the market if we have to collaborate?
Firstly, a small comment. If a startup comes to you after setting a meeting and they actually show you what they told you they show you, I would get worried. Something wrong there, you know. So yeah, I think in terms of impact, to be blunt and brutal, a lot of organizations have actually offshored certain tasks that are manual and simple, and in fact, this is where the impact is probably going to be felt most, because what's being done there is not going to be, it's not going to be necessary to do it there anymore, right? It's going to be smart contract in a certain way. The other thing in terms of working together, well, as I started, I mean, this is not only for fund parts, you can do this also for contracts, you can reconcile basically direct debits between banks, and people, or even any type of basic transactions you do, and people have a lot of friction time with each other, because they only communicate with one counterparty at a time. And even once they're resolved between them two, they actually have not talked to the third counterparty, so the third counterparty may have a good reason for having it different, right? So I think that people are going to start basically work in a more collaborative manner, more productive manner, and stop wasting time basically on, oh, you're wrong, I'm right, whatever, but talk more about, well, why are you doing this, right? That's one thing, basically, because the problem is recurrence, and a lot of mistakes actually, we worked with one bank, and we saw that basically out of 3,000 breaks there every month, basically 20% are recurrent breaks. They come back every month. Why? Because nobody ever takes the time to look what the origin of the problem is. They have spent all their time trying to agree with one person, then the other, and then the other, right? It's a lot of time wasted on nothing. So I think it's going to have a huge impact in terms of productivity, and it's going to have a huge impact also on people's work lives, actually. And you're going to do more interesting, more creative, more pleasant stuff, right? Let me add also, I talked about the importance of using different blockchains. If you want to enter this space, get going into the action in a certain sense, because I'll give you an example. Ethereum has a limitation actually to 12 data strings per transaction. Now, if you wanted to do a complex transaction with a complex asset, that's not enough. Though we're working with Ethereum, right, on different use cases, but no, I'm not criticizing them, but you need to know the limit, and you know those limits by doing it, and be implied in doing it yourself, not let only other people do it. Do it collaboratively, right? So they will tell you, okay, you can do 2 data blocks. Well, then you move to Hyperledger because there is barely any limit on data you can use. So I'm just saying, you'll change the way you work, but get on board early so that your people actually learn to work with this. It's super important. Don't wait. Start now, put some people in it, get into the action basically, right, with your people.
All those efforts on a European level and also on the Belgian FSMA, are they focused on public blockchains? Or are you also looking at private or consortium-based blockchains?
Another for me, I guess. So.
Well, not only for you. I think René can answer that too.
I mean, we are looking. We are trying to be platform agnostic, whatever this may means. But of course, we acknowledge that public blockchains are pure blockchains, but they do have concerns in complying with the regulations that are there, mainly GDPR. We are platform agnostic, so we are looking at the whole spectrum of the blockchains that are there. But I cannot deny you that the Bitcoin blockchain is less governable than a private blockchain or what we call a governed blockchain between member states, for sure.
Yeah, I can endorse the answer given here. We do not pronounce ourselves whether private or public is good or bad, but we come across to a lot of people who are involved in ICOs, and we question the need to use blockchain for the proposition they are offering to the public. And if token issues, the issuance of tokens are necessary for the application. Recently we have had a case in which the providers couldn't give any answer and there proved to be no code behind. So we transferred the file to the office of the public prosecutor. So that is our involvement, because what we see here is that contrary to earlier financial innovation stage, where things were tested amidst institutional investors, when it comes to ICOs, the general public is solicited. Often they do not have a clue about blockchain. They are quite illiterate when it comes to using a digital wallet. So there is a whole lot in the process that get gone wrong on behalf of the financial consumer. In general, of course, we try to educate the public, do not buy what you don't understand, but also on the offering side, there is a lot of work to do in terms of ethics and in terms of norms. Often people come to see us or by themselves or on invitation. And they are ready to move their whole business idea on the side to be in an unregulated space. And of course, that, you know, is very worrisome. the more that we see more and more proofs of scams, fraud, identity theft. And that is our role, you know. We are there to protect the financial consumers, so we have to see what is going on here, and especially when it comes to the issuance of so-called pre-functionality tokens, where there is nothing to prove. So the only thing that gives bottom to the token is the anticipation of future profits. Then we talk about a financial product, and then you know, the financial regulation kicks in. So therefore, I liked very much your presentation on your product, and that people didn't even know that there was blockchain behind. What we often see is that the blockchain is put forward, and often for the DApp, it is not even necessary to use blockchain. They can develop the thing in another way. So I hope that that makes some sense. Okay.
We have another question from Tom.
Alrighty. Strange to use a mic when I'm sitting here, but that's for you. A lot is happening in the invoicing world with OpenPappel. Lots of data transactions there. The reason I'm here is because I'm curious if you're driving the European Pappel innovation there, and you're building something within Europe as well. Then I see A, I see B, I see C, I see C. So I assume there will be some blockchain connection with the OpenPappel framework within Europe to store all those invoices, or is that an assumption?
So in Europe, we have something that we call Connecting Europe Facility, which is a financing program, and also a program that brings interoperability of existing solutions and develop services at cross-border level. Invoicing, e-identity, business registries, health, social security numbers, so a series of services that can be deployed. I'm not a specialist, so I cannot say yes or no, but for sure we are looking at this kind of, firstly at this kind of services that have been deployed, and the switch that we will see that, I mean, in the future is not the reality now, but that these services from being cross-border will be European. So you see the difference between having different data sets and different IT environments at national level to something that could be really cross-border and at European level. Of course, with level of assurance and with capacity to access certain data and not accessing other data. So this is something that actually we are going to discuss with member states that signed the declaration as soon as next month or in 2 months, to try to understand together what will be the most useful use case that we can start trialing. So I cannot prejudge now of what will come. It's really a sort of bottom-up exercises that we want to do with the member states.
Maybe one last question before we all go enjoy some drinks, and we can continue the conversation there, obviously.
I'm Bernard Nicolai, currently lecturing at Solvay, Brussels School. I have a question for all of you, startups, large companies and regulators relating to talent, to develop innovation, to fight innovation maybe, or to regulate it. You need talent, people, not only technology. What are the issues for you? Are you able to attract the right talents and in good quantity? What are the limitations? And how do you see the role of universities? Not only to train new people, but in the reskilling or upskilling process, because jobs are going to disappear and we need other talents.
I can answer. I mean, in our startup position, well, we actually, our developers team is all over the world. So it's like we got someone in exactly at the other part of the world, which is funny. So we have people everywhere. We got this I would say luck to be a startup, and I think more and more young people are looking for startups and like being part of the project. And we got a second luck is that we are like part of a startup that that may, at least that is using a technology that can change the world. So we are lucky to be able to attract people because of this. And I think that's going to be more and more people are looking for this, looking for sense on their job, and I think like working on Blockchain Studio can make sense because you can in some part change the world. I got a funny story. I was with a customer. He was like 35 years old, something like that, and we were talking. I was presenting the Blockchain Studio, and he said, and then he was like having like big eyes and say, he come back. At the end, he went to me. We were like 15 people, and he came to me outside and say, you know what? It was one of the most impressive meeting I had. I say, well, why? Say, I was like 10 years old when I saw internet coming, and now for me, blockchain is gonna be the same. And with this software, I will be like actor of changing the world, and so this is very interesting because blockchain is attracting a lot of people. So it's kind of easy, let's say.
I have a threefold answer to your question. One, the challenge is finding dual competencies, so people who know how to code or understand coding, for example, can apply design thinking. Because the challenge we have now is creating a junction between the technology that's very far ahead, you will be impressed what's out there already, and the human being to adjust that. So you need people who understand, who can stand on both legs. A huge challenge in a certain sense. The other thing is about the perception of life. I think we're in a continuous learning environment. I think we need to start accepting that we may have more than one career. I'm going to be blunt and brutal. We may have more than one partner in life, right? Because we live longer and other reasons. Society as well. Think about the same in terms of careers. And I tell people, you know, look at your current phone. You want the coolest new phone next year. Well, somebody's got to do it. Why not you? If you don't change, how's that phone going to change, right? In the next coming years. Somebody's got to do it. So that's where you play a role in continuous learning, right? The third aspect, I always ask people, well, do you know who owns the Google algorithm? Most people don't. Actually, it's Stanford University, because both Larry and Michael did their PhD there. And the professors walked up to them and said, hey guys, this is really smart. Why don't you create a company? And say, oh yeah, it's cool, we're going to do this, absolutely. Now, these type of professors, and they say, well, then we need the algorithm, right? No problem. We'll give you exclusivity for a bit of equity in your company. Now, when you get there, have professors who have this attitude with their pupil to make them entrepreneurs who are smarter. And by the way, Stanford University is probably fairly happy they did this deal, right? Okay. Then you kind of insufflate the right spirit in your people, basically, whether they're in a big corporation, a startup, whatever they are, to create the future we need. Yeah.
Actually, there's, in terms of how easy it is or not to get talent, my personal view is that if it gets too easy, then you have to redefine your standards. So it should always be hard to get the talent that you should have in the company. The second thing is that we actually work with universities. In Greece, we have a development team, and we work with universities in Athens to source talent, but also to work with students that do PhD dissertations, etc., and also spend part of the time in the company. As you correctly mentioned, we're in a very, very interesting sector. So we're blessed in a way to use the word blockchain in a way to attract people to work with us. But yes, of course, we definitely like to see more universities come forward with much more tangible ways to cooperate with startups, scale-ups, actually the regulator, etc.
A lot have been said, so I will keep it down to 5 key words: hackathons, reskilling, upskilling, new skills development, and role of universities. And just to let you know that universities are partner in this European Blockchain Observatory and Forum, we count very much on them.
Very little to add, of course, now. I think everybody is looking for the right people to face these challenging times. I think everybody should apply new technologies on its own level. For us as a supervisor, we use, for example, and that is what we call in ESMA level, subtech, data analytics and quite well functioning, but we can go further by applying other techniques ourselves. That is true, and we are looking into that more on a European level than on a national level as well. Thank you very much.
Actually, your question was actually a good question to segue to the next event. So the next Fin and Tonic will actually be on talent. So that's perfect. We are finalizing the date. It will be around end of May. So that's one thing. Then as well, you mentioned in your answer hackathon. So we have 2 hackathons that I wanted to highlight here for the hackers in the room, and also a couple of them that European Commission just mentioned. One is Hack for Diamonds. I'm not sure if you're going to get diamonds if you win, but it's one event happening May 4 to May 6 in Antwerp, and B-Hive is actually a partner of that event. And the other one is something organized as well from the European Commission. It's the EU Blockathon. June 22nd and 25th. Just you need to apply before April 30th. So if you are a hacker interested, just go check it out. So yes.
And they are searching for good talents.
So we didn't ask you to ask this question, but it was just perfect. One of the things quickly to highlight is the Hub Roadshow that we're continuing to do. We're going to be in Milan, in Tallinn, and in Amsterdam to connect our partners and our members. For the people interested, just come talk to me after the drink. And then as well, the conference that we'll do at the National Bank of Belgium, September 26th. Again, there is a deadline for the early bird, I think end of this month. So just don't hesitate. We will obviously have also a talk on blockchain, since it's a very hot topic. I want to thank all our speakers today, all our partners, and then invite everyone to go for a drink. Thank you very much.